So today we're going to talk about the water cycle. So the first thing you're going to want to do is in your notes go ahead and draw this picture. You need the sun, water, got a section of land here, a tree, and then also some beautiful mountains that I have drawn here. So the first thing is the water cycle is driven by our sunlight. And we're going to label that number 1 because on the next page you're going to write down the water cycle explained. So we have something called insolation, incoming solar radiation, warming the atmosphere and causing our water to evaporate. So that's number 2. Not only do we have evaporation from our water sources, we also have something called transpiration, which is a product of photosynthesis. So that water vapor that enters the atmosphere either by evaporation or transpiration is going to rise and expand and cool. And it's going to cool to the dew point, making our clouds. Those clouds are going to fill up with water. And eventually, we'll have precipitation falling to the ground. Now, a few things can happen to our water when it reaches Earth. The first one is it can seep or sink into the ground. We call that infiltration. It can run over the surface back to oceans. So that's runoff back to oceans, lakes, streams. It can be held in glaciers. We call that water retention. So this is the drawing that you're going to need for the water cycle. So the next part is the water cycle explained. So insolation, incoming solar radiation, warms the atmosphere. Evaporation is where we have liquid water changing to water vapor. Don't forget we also have transpiration, which is where plants give off water vapor. Scientists like to put words together, so we have the process of evapotranspiration, which is where all of the water vapor in the atmosphere. So evapotranspiration represents all of the water that is found in our atmosphere, all the water vapor. Our water will then rise, cool, and expand. The air will cool to the dew point and condenses to make clouds. Precipitation then occurs, which is liquid or solid water falling to the ground. And then 4 things can happen when precipitation hits the ground. The first one is evapotranspiration, which is where 2/3 of our precipitation is going to return to the atmosphere. Next thing that could happen is infiltration. Precipitation can seep or sink into the ground. Runoff. Precipitation can flow over Earth's surface and return to large bodies of water. And then we have our water retention, which is where precipitation is stored on land, in glaciers, or on leaves of plants. So that's the water cycle explained. So if you want to pause the video to go ahead and write that down. One last thing that we need to add to our water cycle here are the subsurface zones. So we're going to draw a line coming out from the water table. The first zone is at the top and it's filled with part water, part air. And that is the zone of aeration. Underneath that, we have the zone of saturation. And then we also have our impermeable bedrock, meaning no water can go through. So we have the zone of aeration, which is partly filled with water. We have the zone of saturation, which is completely filled with water or saturated with water. And this boundary between the two is our water table. And our water table will move up and down depending on how saturated the ground is. So after the snow melts, the water table will move up, causing the zone of aeration to be small or non-existent. During the summertime, when there's times of drought, the water table may drop down below where the zone of saturation is now and cause wells to run dry. So in this area, we want to make sure that we have our wells drilled far enough down into the zone of saturation so that if there was a chance of a drought, we would still be able to get water into our home.